Welcome to the Reddit Family Tallis YouTube channel, a place where genuine and inspiring family stories are shared. Here, you'll enjoy unique videos about family life, humorous moments, and meaningful lessons. Let's explore together the stories where love and connection shine through. Join us in creating beautiful memories. Please comment and let us know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe now so you won't miss the special video launching tomorrow. They kicked me out of my own house. But they forgot who really owns it. My father, Robert, was a self-made man. He built his construction business from the ground up in Chicago, starting with nothing but a pickup truck, a set of tools, and a relentless work ethic. While many contractors struggled to survive economic downturns, including the recession of the late 1980s, my father thrived because he had a vision, one built on trust, craftsmanship, and relationships. People first, profits second, he always said. He believed that integrity and honesty would always win in the long run. He refused to cut corners or promise unrealistic deadlines just to win contracts. Instead, he was upfront with clients, providing them with honest timelines and transparent costs. His approach made him a respected name in the industry, and by the mid-1990s, his company was thriving. Growing up, I watched my father pour his heart into his work. He wasn't just building houses, he was building relationships. He treated his employees like family, and in return, they were fiercely loyal to him. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, many businesses crumbled. My father, however, refused to let anyone go. Instead, he took out a second mortgage on his prized 1967 Mustang and cut his own salary to zero just to keep his workers employed. That was the kind of man he was. Despite his demanding job, he always made time for me. He encouraged my education, pushing me toward technology, believing it was the future. When I was accepted into the University of Washington's computer science program, he was my biggest supporter. Build something that lasts, he told me, whether it's with code or concrete. His words stayed with me throughout my career. But his greatest pride wasn't his business, it was our family home. A beautiful craftsman-style house in the suburbs of Chicago. It was the first major project he bought with the profits from his early success. He didn't just live in it, he maintained it like a masterpiece. Every renovation, every repair was planned meticulously. He kept a detailed spreadsheet documenting every change, from the type of wood used in the kitchen cabinets to the exact shade of paint on the walls. To my father, the house was more than just a place to live, it was a living testament to his hard work and legacy. He built it to last, just like everything else he touched. I never imagined that one day, I would have to fight to protect everything he left behind. After my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack at 58, my world changed overnight. Losing him was devastating. But what followed was even worse. In the weeks after the funeral, as we waded through legal paperwork and estate matters, my mother, Linda, began attending a grief support group at her church. At first, I thought it was good for her, something to help her cope. She talked about a man she met there, Steve, a widower who had lost his wife to cancer. It started with casual mentions. Steve recommended this book, or Steve says grief comes in waves. But soon, it became clear that he was more than just a friend. Within 6 months, Steve had practically moved into my father's house. And he didn't come alone. He brought along his 2 grown children, James, 30, and Lisa, 32. My mother, who had once been so devoted to my father's legacy, suddenly seemed eager to leave it behind. The beautiful home my dad had built, his pride and joy, was now being treated like some communal space for a man we barely knew and his entitled kids. I tried to be understanding. Maybe she just needed a fresh start, I told myself. But Steve's presence became more than just companionship. He started making changes. The first time I saw him acting like the house was his, I brushed it off. Then, one weekend, I walked in to find contractors tearing apart the built-in bookshelves my dad had handcrafted in the living room. The same shelves where my mom used to proudly display her collection of antique teacups, the same shelves my father and I had built together, piece by piece. Steve stood there, supervising the workers like he owned the place. "We're modernizing the space," he said casually, like it was nothing. I was furious. "You didn't even ask me," I said, trying to stay calm. Steve smirked. "Your mother and I live here now. We don't need permission to improve our home." Our home. Those words echoed in my head like a punch to the gut. It wasn't his home. It was my father's house. It was mine. But somehow, this man had inserted himself into everything my dad built. My mother, the woman who had once sat with my father on that back deck, listening to his dreams for our family, just nodded along. "Steve knows what he's doing," she said. I could feel my father's legacy slipping through my fingers, and I knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning of a battle I never wanted to fight. Steve wasn't just settling into my father's house, he was taking over. Every time I visited, something was different. The walls were repainted, the hardwood floors my father meticulously refinished had been ripped up and replaced with cheap vinyl planks. My father's carefully maintained workshop, once a sanctuary where he taught me everything from woodworking to problem solving, had been emptied. James, Steve's 30-year-old son, had transformed it into his personal CrossFit gym. When I walked in one afternoon, dumbbells and resistance bands were scattered across the floor, and my father's tools, the same tools we had used to build the bookshelves, the deck, the workshop itself, were gone. "Where are Dad's tools?" I demanded. James shrugged, barely looking up from his workout. "Sold them. Didn't think you'd mind." Didn't think I'd mind? Those tools were more than just hammers and saws. They were a part of my father's legacy, a piece of him that I had left. And now, they were gone, sold off like junk at some yard sale. I stormed inside to find my mother. "You let them sell Dad's tools?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger. She sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. James needed space, and we weren't using them anymore. We weren't using them? I felt the ground shift beneath me. It wasn't just about the tools, or the workshop, or even the house. It was about respect. My father had spent his life building this home, shaping it with his own hands, and now these people, these strangers, were erasing every trace of him. And then Steve dropped the bombshell. "Since we're paying to live here," he said, leaning back in my father's old chair, "I think it's only fair that we have our names on the deed." I stared at him, trying to process what I had just heard. You don't pay a mortgage, I shot back. Dad paid off this house years ago. Steve smiled, that smug, self-assured grin I had come to despise. We take care of the house. We've put in money for renovations. Sweat equity counts for something. That was it. I had tried to be patient, tried to respect my mother's choices, but this was too much. They weren't just taking over my father's home, they wanted to steal it from me. And I wasn't going to let them. Steve's arrogance knew no limits. After months of watching him and his children dismantle my father's legacy, I had finally had enough. The moment he mentioned putting his name on the deed, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about my father's house anymore. This was about everything he had built, everything he had worked for, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. That night, I sat down with Emily and laid everything out. They're walking all over me, I said, frustration boiling in my chest. I've been paying for the taxes, the maintenance, everything. And now, they think they deserve to own the place? Emily nodded, her expression firm. It's time to stop playing nice. I contacted Mr. Anderson, my father's attorney, first thing in the morning. I want them out, I said. What are my options? Mr. Anderson didn't hesitate. Legally, the house is yours. You have every right to evict them. That was all I needed to hear. At our next weekly visit, I broke the news. Mom, Steve, and James were sitting at the dining table, casually chatting as if they hadn't been destroying my father's home piece by piece. I didn't waste time. You have 2 weeks to find another place to live, I said, dropping a printed notice on the table. Mom's face paled. You can't do this, she whispered. Steve scoffed, crossing his arms. You think you can just kick us out? We live here. No, I shot back. You squat here. You don't own this house, you don't pay rent, and you sure as hell don't get to decide what happens to my father's home. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't budge. We're family, she pleaded. I corrected. A family doesn't betray each other like this. Steve tried to intimidate me, stepping forward as if to challenge my decision. You're going to regret this. I didn't flinch. No, Steve. You are. The countdown had begun. They had 2 weeks to pack up and leave. No more arguments, no more manipulations. I had given them every chance to do the right thing, and they had thrown it back in my face. Now, I was taking back what was rightfully mine. The 2-week deadline had come and gone. My patience had worn thin, and I was done entertaining their excuses. Steve and his family had done everything they could to delay the inevitable, pleading, guilt-tripping, even staging an intervention with church members to paint me as the villain. But none of it worked. They had underestimated just how determined I was to reclaim what was mine. That morning, I arrived at the house with Mr. Anderson and a locksmith. I wasn't taking any chances. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the moving truck. At first, relief washed over me. They were finally leaving. but as I got closer, I realized the truth. The truck wasn't filled with their belongings. It was filled with my father's things. I stormed inside, heart pounding with fury. Mom was sitting in the living room, tears in her eyes, while Steve barked orders at a group of movers. "Get the tools from the garage," he instructed. "And don't forget the antique dresser from the master bedroom." I saw red. What the hell is going on? My voice was sharp, cutting through the chaos. Steve turned, his face twisted into a smug grin. "Just taking what's ours," he said. "Sweat equity, remember? We've put a lot into this house." I stepped forward, fists clenched. "This house was never yours to begin with. And if you so much as touch another one of my father's things, I will have you arrested for theft." Mom finally spoke up, her voice weak. "Please, just let them take a few things. It'll make this easier." "Easier?" I scoffed. "For who? You? Because you chose a man who's been leeching off my father's legacy and destroying everything he built?" "No, Mom. I've given you enough time, enough chances. You made your choice, now live with it." Steve laughed bitterly. "You think you're some kind of hero, kicking your own mother out? You're heartless." I met his glare without hesitation. "No, Steve. You're heartless, for walking into my father's house and trying to claim it as your own. For treating me like a kid who could be manipulated. But you made one mistake, you forgot who really owns this place." At that moment, the locksmith signaled to me. The locks had been changed. This was it. "Your time is up," I said, stepping aside and pointing to the door. "Get out." Steve's face burned with rage, but he knew there was no fight left to win. He grabbed his keys, muttered something under his breath, and stomped out. Mom hesitated for a moment, her eyes pleading with me one last time, but I didn't budge. I watched as they drove away, taking their entitlement with them. The house was mine again, not just legally, but in every way that mattered. As I stepped inside, I took a deep breath, feeling something I hadn't in a long time: peace. My father's legacy had been restored. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Your thoughts matter. What would you have done in this situation? Do you think I made the right decision, or was there another way to handle it? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever faced a similar family conflict? How did you deal with it? Share your experiences. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless.